Welcome to this Plan Commission meeting for the City of Marshfield for Tuesday, May 18th of 2021. I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call. Josh.
Rosendich.
Here.
Caprillion. Here. Pinker. Johnson. Here. Golden. Here. Alderperson Nick Peschel.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 3 is approval of minutes for the April 2021 meeting. So we'll make a motion. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mr. Pinker. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That item carries. Item number 4, an introduction of new members. Are you going to take care of that, Josh, or?
Yeah, sure. So I apologize. Last month we had a new member, Chris Golden, who I forgot to introduce, but he is the second newest member of the Plan Commission. And also we have Alan Johnson with us, who's our newest member. So, and actually Alderperson Nick Peschel so we have 3 new members on the Plan Commission today. And we look forward to working with all of you on this capacity and excited to have you on board. So I don't know if you guys have anything to say as far as your personal introductions, but you're welcome to if you want. Very good. Well, welcome.
And I'll look forward to help from all of you guys that have been here for 2 weeks already. Item number 5 is election of a vice chairperson. I'll entertain a motion entertain a nomination. Mr. Rosendich.
I nominate John Caprillion.
John Caprillion has been nominated. Is there a second? Or do we need a second? We don't need a second for that. Is there any other nominations? Any other nomination? Mr. Pinker.
I move nominations be closed and a unanimous ballot be cast.
Is there a second for that? Okay. Nominations are closed. Mr. Caprillion is nominated. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Mr. Caprillion, you're the vice chairperson. Item number 6 is citizen comments. Are there any citizens who wish to make a comment? Please come to the podium and state your name and address and make your comments. Any citizen comments? Third time? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 7 is a conditional use permit request by Scott Stifler to allow a personal storage facility land use in the CMU Community Mixed Use Zoning District located at 503 East Ives Street, parcel 3303216, presented by Emmett Simkowski, Associate Planner.
Thank you, Mr. Peschel. So the property in question is located within the Marshfield Mall at 503 East Ives. It's located between North Central Avenue and North Peach Avenue. The surrounding area is primarily zoned community mixed use. However, there is some 2-family residential on the east side of North Peach, and Brain Park is also single-family residential. The building applicant plans to utilize is the late JCPenney's building, and it'll consist of 141 personal storage units at full build-out. The proposed use will not have any impact to the exterior of the building, with the exception of signage, and it'll all be permitted in accordance with Chapter 24. This is proposed layout, kind of what it'll be like an old JCPenney building. So land use requirements for the CMU district for personal storage facilities are all entrance to the individual storage units shall be accessed from the interior of the building. They shall be located in an existing commercial building as an adaptive reuse project. No buffer yard is required, and facilities may run electrical powers within hallways, common area, or office areas, but not in individual storage units except for lighting. The proposal is meeting these standards. Some other considerations, parking. Proposed use will use the existing JCPenney's building. Parking requirements for personal storage facility is 1 space for each employee of the largest shift. The applicant has stated that their facility should be completely automated once their 70% fill rate is achieved, but until it's there may be 1 staff member around helping out. The old JCPenney's building, for example, would have required 113 parking stalls based on square footage. So this use has exceptionally lower parking requirements than what parking situation is currently set up for. For hours of operation and security, the applicant is requesting that the facility remains open 24 hours a day to accommodate customers with different schedules. The facility will be protected by a keypad entryway to allow customers to access and to hopefully keep non-customers out. Facility will also be under video surveillance at all times, in which applicants can monitor and see who's accessing the facility. Plan Commission has concerns with hours of operation. The applicant did mention they would be willing to adjust hours from 6 a.m. through 9 p.m. However, staff would recommend to allow Marshfield Mall management to set hours of operation in accordance with their lease agreement, their needs, and possibly their operating policy. Currently, right now, the applicant is working on engineered plans to submit the state for approval, and they will follow all commercial building codes requirements. So the applicant is not here to answer any questions, but I do have them available by phone if we do. But staff's recommendation is to approve the conditional use request by Scott Stifler to allow for personal storage facility in the CMU Community Mixed Use Zoning District with the following conditions. The storage of items outdoors is prohibited. No personal business may be run out of personal storage facility units. Minor site plan changes may be approved administratively, provided they do not need additional exceptions from the zoning code or from any conditions approved with this conditional use permit. Thank you.
Josh, do I do the public hearing first or ask for comments first?
Yeah, the public hearing would be open
Okay.
at this time.
This item requires a public hearing. Are there anybody from the public here who wishes to comment on this matter? Anybody from the public wishing to comment? Going 3 times. Seeing none, are there any comments from the Plan Commission?
Then you could have a motion.
Okay, a motion then. Motion by Paul.
Move to approve.
Okay, and second? Second by Mr. Penker. Any comments? Quentin?
Question, and you might be able to answer this, Emmett. Is the entryway on the front side, like the old entryway that used to be JCPenney's? Is it just the loading dock that's the entryway? Because it's pretty secluded back there.
Yeah, there is one door. We're trying to think how to entrance. There's the awning over the door would be the east side of the building.
Yeah.
That is proposed to be the main entryway. According to the applicant, it's going to be closed off from the mall, so people aren't going to be able to walk from the storage units at any time into the mall. So, and again, that's all interior stuff, and I'm sure mall management will take care of it or have restrictions on them for that as well.
And the current facility is being housed by a church right now, correct?
Correct, I believe there is something in there.
And this is contingent on them leaving, and then this takes place after that.
I think there is some sort of a partnership. They may still use a portion of the building. I believe they are working together on the lease or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? Questions? Okay, we have a motion to approve the conditional use permit. Seeing no further questions or comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Item number 8, conditional use permit request by Crystal Jackson to allow for an exception to the fence height and opacity requirements for the property located at 512 Hardacre Avenue, parcel 33-02169, presented by Bryce Hembrook.
Thank you. So the applicant is requesting to construct a 6-foot white vinyl privacy fence in the front yard along West 6th Street. So the front facade of the building, or front facade of the house, it would appear that it's off of Hardacre Avenue, but with how our zoning code reads, the front yard would actually be considered off of 6th Street. There are front yard fencing requirements in our code, and they are supposed to be no taller than 4 feet and 50% opaque. So in this case, they would be requesting an exception to that, which they are allowed to through a CUP. They are also proposing a 4-foot white picket fence along Hardacre Avenue. So if you go to the next slide, please. So in the site plan, the white picket fence would be on the the lower side. It would be pointing towards the east, and then the 6th Street would be the 6-foot privacy fence. There would also be a 6-foot white privacy fence on the side property, which would be on the, to the top of the page or to the west. So no exceptions would be required for the picket fence. However, the fence will need to stay out of the vision triangle for the driveway. There's a 10 by 10 vision triangle. So we would work with the applicant on addressing that issue. I think they would just have to move the fence about a foot in the other direction. So we believe that we'd be able to approve that administratively if the Plan Commission is comfortable with that. So ultimately, we believe that the purpose of the regulation was to have a smaller and open fence along the front facade of a home. In this case, the front facade of the house just happens to be what's considered the street side yard. So we believe that the applicant is, meeting the intent of the regulation, but that the code just doesn't, work in this case. In the future zoning code rewrite, staff is planning on proposing some changes to allow for the zoning administrator to determine a different front yard in circumstances like this. So this is actually a perfect example of what we were looking to change in the future. Also, next slide, please. Sorry. And then here's an example of the 4-foot picket fence. So this one does not need an exception. Next one, please. And then this would be the one that would require the exception. And the applicant mentioned that, she has young kids and they would like to have a nice fence, to basically block them from the traffic in what they consider to be their backyard. This is a historic property and thus a certificate of appropriateness is required, but that will be discussed later in the meeting. So we will review that after the public hearing items are done. Next slide, please. So with that, we would recommend to approve the request with the following conditions and exceptions. Number one, the applicant is permitted to have a 6-foot privacy fence located in the front yard along West 6th Street. Number two, the final site plan must show the fence meeting the driveway vision triangle, and this may be approved administratively. Number three, minor adjustments to the site plan may be approved administratively, provided no other exceptions are required. Thank you.
Okay, this also requires a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? Any public comments? Going 3 times, hearing none. We're looking for a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the listed exceptions and conditions. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mr. Golden. Any comments or questions? Mr. Pinker.
This item was discussed at the Historic Preservation Committee. And at that time, the committee did believe this was appropriate for the historical value. And in addition, there was no concern about the type of fence, height of the fence, because there appeared to be continuity with a neighboring property.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any questions for Bryce? Seeing none, please vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Item number 9, a conditional use permit request by Epic Home Care LLC to allow a community living arrangement facility with 4 beds located at 1607 Emmanuel Court, parcel 33-6650. This request includes exceptions for the total number of community living arrangement beds to exceed 1% of the city population, 1% of the aldermanic district, and the aldermanic district population, and to be located within 2,000 feet of another similar facility. Presenters Emmett Simkowski, Associate Planner. Emmett.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Paschal. So the property in question is 1607 Emmanuel Court. It's located on the north end of the city in a primarily residential neighborhood. There is one small CMU parcel on the north side of West McMillan. So the the home is a large 3-bedroom room, and currently the applicant is in the process of converting it to a 5-bedroom home. They're proposing to have a total of 4 residents residing at the home, and there will be 2 individual rooms and 1 double room. The home will be occupied by the applicant and family. The Applicant has no plans to substantially modify the exterior of the home with the exception of landscaping and ordinary maintenance. The home will remain the same appearance as a single-family dwelling. So because of the quantity of these facilities within the city of Marshfield, the following requirements are not being met. It's within 2,000 feet of another facility, which is, Stony River on McMillan, about 1,000 feet to the west. And it exceeds the capacity of all community living arrangements in the city by 1% and aldermanic district. And it allows Plan Commission to grant exceptions to these through a conditional use permit. So these regulations are mainly intended to ensure that these facilities are distributed throughout a community and not relegated to being in one neighborhood that would feel institutionalized. So 2,000 feet separation, you got that one. Currently, District 2, which this is in 2010 census had a population of 1,841 individuals. This would have limited that district to 19 beds. Currently, there are 116 beds within this district, and within the city, there's a total of 307 beds. So for parking-wise, community living arrangements with 1 to 8 beds require 1 parking space for each employee at the largest shift. The applicant will have 2 employees there at an on-needed basis, and the applicant will be the primary staff member. With these requirements, a total of 4 parking spaces are required. So there's an existing attached 3-car garage, and then the parking area in front of the building is still 2,500 square feet. The existing site would easily accommodate the required parking for this use. Another thing, typically these, when they're not situated in a single-family dwelling, there's a requirement to have buffer yards on residential or single-family properties. Seeing this is an existing single-family home, no buffer yards are also required for this. So here's just for information, the regulated care facilities and capacities as of January 2021. As you can see with the 2,000-foot buffer, at this point, it'd be difficult to cite another one of these facilities in much of the city without one of these conditional uses for an exception. With that, staff's recommendation is to approve the conditional use request by Epic Home Care for a community living arrangement with the following conditions and exceptions. Adult family home may operate within 2,000 feet of another regulated care facility. The adult family home may be allowed to exceed 1% of the city's population or 1% of the aldermanic district's population in which the facility resides. And minor site plan changes may be administratively approved, provided they do not need additional exceptions from the zoning code or from any conditions approved with this conditional use permit. Thank you.
This item requires a public hearing as well. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this matter? Any public comments? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve with the following exceptions. Mr. Penker, motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Kerpillion, are there any comments? Mr. Rosendich.
Emmett, at the beginning, you said that it was already under construction for the remodel, correct? Like
Correct.
before the zoning was done?
Correct.
Before we did this? What would have occurred if we deny it and they do the reconstruction?
Well, it's still a single family home.
So it
You can
just
have a
would
5-bedroom.
maintain and no business could run out of there, is basically what we're saying.
Well, it's still a single family home. You could have a family with 5 people go
Right,
live
but
there.
but the business couldn't run out of there,
Technically, no.
correct?
No, because they would need to go through this. They're within and those
Is
requirements.
that typical procedure to sort of remodel and then ask for business exception?
I don't, this came up, they were getting building permits, and then there's obviously special building permits you need for this type
Sure.
of facility. And then the building inspectors cued us in that this was happening, and we're like, well, we better get you squared away on this, so.
Okay, so they would have been just progressing without trying to get it rezoned for this.
Yep, well, as long as just exceptions to have this
The
facility
exception.
there. But I mean, there's a lot of building permits that are required for especially these type of facilities, and we would have picked up on it pretty quick.
Okay,
We work pretty closely with the building inspectors, and they've been there quite a bit already too, so.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'll comment, this is my district, and I have not received any comments or complaints or anything from anyone else in the district concerning this facility, so I think that we can go forward with it as far as I'm concerned. Seeing no further comments or questions, please vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Item number 10. So where we're at? Yeah. Item 10. Municipal Code Amendment request by the Marshfield Clinic Health System to amend Chapter 18, Sections 18 to 72, yard setback adjustments, and 18-73, intrusions into required yards, to allow permitted intrusions into required yards for roads that are identified as major streets, and to add language to allow skywalks as a permitted intrusion into a required yard. I hope to someday get all this language down. The presenter is Bryce Hembrook, City Planner.
Thank you.
Bryce.
Thank you, and sorry for making you read that. So yeah, the applicant, Marshfield Clinic Health System, they're, planning on constructing another skywalk. The existing skywalks that are on their campus, existed prior to this zoning code. And, there's really not much information that we could find on the approval process that they, had in the past. So we thought that this would be a good, clean way to fix it. And we were, when we were looking at, future zoning code changes, this is one thing that we had in mind, just because there really was no way to address skywalks or tunnels. So the applicant is proposing language in order to allow the skywalk to essentially intrude into the required yard and to add language that said intrusions are permitted along major streets. So there's a list of intrusions. I believe it's section 1873. It kind of goes through, in some cases where you can go into the setback slightly when it's, stated. So the two changes that they're proposing here are intrusions into the required major street setback may be allowed in accordance with section 1873. They're adding that to section 1872 4D. And a major street is anything that's identified. We have a map from our 2007 comprehensive plan that discusses major and minor arterials. If a street is a major minor arterial, they would have to meet this 50-foot major street setback. And so it was never really clear if the intrusions included these major street setbacks. It didn't say one way or another, so it kind of left it up to the zoning administrator to decide on a case-by-case basis. So this is kind of a way to make sure that we stay consistent. The second proposal would be to add, quote, skywalks and similar enclosed structures, including any necessary support structures that provide pedestrian travel between buildings separated by property lines, yards, alleys, or streets are not subject to setback requirements. Such structures encroaching on and over the right-of-way shall be reviewed and approved by the Board of Public Works prior to installation, and this would be added to section 1873 2M. So right now, there's currently only 2 skywalks in the city. We would anticipate that there's not going to be, more than, 3 anytime soon. However, this would affect the citywide zoning and not just the campus district. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear that it could, could come up in the future somewhere else if there was a project that warranted that. The amendment would allow for skywalks to intrude into the setbacks when crossing right-of-ways, but this would require Board of Public Works approval. And so this is, to us, more important that the Board of Public Works has a say since it's going over the right-of-way. Overall, staff is supportive of this request. We've discussed adding similar regulations in the past, just to clarify whether or not skywalks were permitted. Because we think, if this amendment is not approved, the applicant could still submit for a variance request, and that would review the specific request at the Zoning Board of Appeals. Additionally, the campus master plan could be amended to allow for 0-foot setbacks if specifically stated. So we reviewed these options with the applicant, and we decided that a municipal code amendment would probably be the best way to go about it, since we were considering that change to begin with. So with that, the recommendation would be to approve the municipal code amendment request and to direct staff to prepare an ordinance for common council consideration. Thank you.
This item also requires a public hearing, so the public hearing is open. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this? First, state your name and address and make your comments at the podium.
Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners, my name is Eric Hansen. I'm a civil engineer with HGA, working with Marshfield Clinic on the connector project, Skyway project. Just wanted to state that there is an existing Skyway between the clinic building and their east building on campus. That's a public corridor through there. This new Skyway is a patient transport, so it can't be through a public corridor. In order to meet health code requirements, they need another connector between the two buildings. So that's the basis for this discussion that we've had with the city. And I want to say Josh and Emmett and Bryce have been very helpful in guiding us through this process. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other public comments? Any comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and I will entertain a motion to approve the municipal code amendment request and direct staff to prepare an ordinance for common council consideration. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mr. Krapilian. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Krapilian.
Question for the engineer. You mentioned it's for, the one in existence right now is for public crossing. What do they do now to transport patients between the two buildings?
To answer your question, I'm the civil engineer, so I work outside the building. So transport, I believe right now there isn't patient transport between the two buildings themselves. I believe there's some remodeling going on to allow patients to be in that east building.
So they just don't do it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Pinker.
I've got two. This is, first one's for staff, actually both are for staff. By default, does this serve as an amendment to the campus master plan?
So since the campus master plan has to follow zoning code requirements, it would. However, we've been talking with the clinic about updating a temporary amendment to the plan in upcoming months. So we will address that specifically when we go through that process. But yes, the zoning code changing would by default change how we would look at this in the campus district, correct?
Okay, then the second question. Since this is going to be going over a city street,
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be occupying air more or less owned by the city,
Mm-hmm.
is there any place within, and I couldn't find it, but within this ordinance, or what other ordinance do we have that governs leasing the airspace?
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics, but Public Works Director Dan Connect is working with them on an airspace lease. So I think that the lease is just approved by Board of Public Works. I don't know that 100%, but I believe that was a process that he informed me of.
Josh?
Yeah, there's actually a statutory provision. Wisconsin state statutes require that there's a lease agreement for airspace over the airspace lease for skyways. So there's a specific, it's kind of an obscure provision of the statutes, but there is a specific provision that requires a lease, and I think it's approved by ordinance. One thing I would like to maybe correct on here, or give us staff some flexibility, is we say approval by Board of Public Works, but technically everything's approved by council. So we may want to say that in case, I know the Board of Public Works reviews it, but they may not necessarily make a recommendation all the time. So I think just to give us some flexibility to put common council in there for approval. Generally, I think the Board of Public Works would review any airspace lease because that's just the process, but ultimately the approval comes to council.
Mr. Pinker, anything more? No. Okay, my question just has to do with the part about the intrusions there. This does not affect the setback for the two buildings. It just affects the setback for the
Correct. So yeah,
structure above.
the setback for the building would have to come from where the foundation of the building is. So the foundation of the building could not go any closer. It would just be for the skywalk and any supporting structures.
Okay.
So.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve the municipal code amendment request and prepare an ordinance for common council consideration. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Item number 11. Certificate of appropriateness request by Crystal Jackson to add fencing on the property located at 512 Hardacre Avenue, also known as the George and Jenny Booth House. Presenter is Bryce Hembrook, city planner. Bryce.
Thank you. Yeah, so this may seem familiar. The item was already discussed. Thus, the applicant is looking to add a 4-foot white picket fence along Hardacre Avenue and a 6-foot along 6th Street. She chose a white picket fence in front of the front facade in order to try to remain true to the architectural style of the home, the Cape Cod style. This does require a certificate of appropriateness, which doesn't come to the Plan Commission that often. But the reason why it does is because it is a exterior alteration and it requires a building permit. Thus, the process is that Historic Preservation Committee reviews this request, makes a recommendation to the Plan Commission, and then the Plan Commission makes a recommendation to approve or deny the request. So the Historic Preservation Committee reviewed and recommended approval of this based on the criteria from the Secretary of Interior Standards for Historic Rehabilitation. Generally, they were all in agreement that it was a nice style fence that wouldn't detract from the historical significance of the home. So with that, the HPC recommended to approve the COA in order to allow the applicant to construct the fence, and the recommendation is to approve. Thank you.
Okay, we don't need a public hearing on this, so I would entertain a motion to, a motion for the staff's recommendation. Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Kirpillion. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Item 12, an update on concerns regarding the city's impact on development projects in Marshfield, presented by Josh Miller, Development Services Department, and Scott Larson from Mackey. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Yeah, at the last month's meeting, Mr. Pinker brought up asking staff to look into what impact, if any, that some of the negativity that's gone on, some of the stories and situations we've had related to the city government, common council and the police department may have had on any impact on development projects that may have come in or not come in. Talked to Scott Larson a little bit about it, the director at the chamber, and ultimately it's such a, we don't hear about those things directly. Obviously, what's going on doesn't help us. Anytime there's negative things swirling around the community, it's not a good thing. We have heard that from businesses, so we know that there's a concern. People are aware. They pay attention to that. But ultimately, we can't quantify that there's been any businesses lost or any businesses or economic development opportunities not happen because of that. But I guess I invited Scott. He was kind enough to come to the meeting and share his thoughts and what he's seeing out in the business community regarding this topic.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. As Josh mentioned, yeah, it's very difficult to quantify whether or not there's been specific harm as it relates to economic development projects. Typically, the way projects work is that those development opportunities, there's work being done independently. They have site selectors and people in charge of that are out doing independent searches on that. And by the time you hear from them, meaning if they were to contact Josh or contact the chamber with regard to interest in a project in Marshfield, they've already done a great deal of background work already, and that means that we're probably one of their final destinations looking at that. So they generally don't come right out and tell you that, yeah, because of what we heard from you in the news is a reason why we've discontinued searching in your community. Not to say that that doesn't play into their search criteria, because it certainly can, because they're looking at criteria where how easy is it to deal with the city? From a regulatory standpoint, from permitting, from an aspect of easeability of locations, making changes, things of that nature. So those types of situations are going to give them obviously pause if they hear a lot of negative information on a particular community. They may just look at that and say, probably we have so many other options that we can look at. Let's just move on and we'll concentrate somewhere else. So the quantification of the economic development part, again, is a little difficult to say. As Josh mentioned, we definitely know it's not helping us. That we can say for sure, because again, the aspect of negative press just sets an opinion in both the general public and other people's minds that there's something going on in that community, and we just, again, there are so many other options available for economic development that it's the case of let's go where the least resistance is apparent to us, and then we'll move on. One of the other things that I would mention, where there is more of a harm and concern going on, is our ability to recruit workforce. I have had numerous communications with employers, and that's one of their biggest concerns is this media coverage and the information that's being disseminated is such that it is making it more difficult for them to be able to attract workforce. And right now, the attraction of workforce is even more important and more highly sought after than economic development of new businesses. I think all you've had to do is listen to the media reports over the last few days talking about the issues not only in the state but in the nation about incentives being necessary to get people off the unemployment rolls and back into the workforce, and ways to take what was meant to be unemployment incentives and turn those into employment incentives. So that has definitely been a concern to our employers here in the area. That's something that the chamber is extremely involved in, not only locally, but we're involved in organizations at the regional level and at the state level with initiatives that are set upon attracting workforce to either the state of Wisconsin, to central Wisconsin, and ultimately to Marshfield. So what does occur, what types of media coverage we get in the community certainly is very concerning to us. And we want to make sure that when we are being covered, we're being covered for positive things happening here, not negative things. Some of the other communications that I've heard in talking with business people is their general concern about obviously what's going on with the local government, the issue of what type of message that sends, and are we able to attract, or are people encouraged to run or apply for these governmental positions with this going on. That generally is the concern that's going on, that we're hearing a great deal of from the business community, is on those two main issues relating to how is the city being perceived, how is the city functioning, are we still functioning in a reasonable and effective manner, which is conducive to the conducting of business. And then what impact is this having on our ability to attract workforce to the community?
Okay. Yeah, we've had some controversy the last year or so that we would gladly have done without, but I can safely say that underneath all of that, the city is running smoothly and all of our functions are being
Right.
carried out properly. So I'm glad that that's going on. And hopefully we are moving forward on getting back to normal with
Right.
the other things.
Well, we hope so too, and we have an opportunity coming up, for those of you, if you're not aware, with Dairy Fest coming up, Channel 7 is doing a Your Town. They're kicking that programming off again and using Marshfield as their first segment, first community to showcase the Your Town event. So we're gonna have nearly a week of regional television coverage here in the community, and so we want to take full advantage of that opportunity and make sure that we are getting very positive pro-community storylines and activities shown to the central Wisconsin region that is the viewing audience of Channel 7. So we have some good opportunity to address and put forth some really good positive information here to counter some of the negative coverage we've had over the last couple of months.
Great. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Scott or Josh? Mr. Pinker?
Scott, thank you very much. I found your comments very enlightening. Plus, a whole page of questions I had for you were already answered. Thank you.
Darn. Thought I wouldn't have done that good a job of covering that. So you're always very thorough with your questions. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions or comments that they want to make? Thank you, Scott.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Item number 13, very interesting item, discussion on parklets, presented by Bryce Hemrock, City Planner.
Sorry. Thank you. So yeah, at the last meeting in April, Mr. Pinker brought up that Eau Claire has recently, I think they approved their ordinance on parklets. And so he just asked if I could bring some information forward. And so in the packet, I included some information that I got, that I received from, I believe she was the Director of Engineering at Eau Claire. So I provided the ordinance as well as some examples. So there's many different definitions of a parklet. However, I found one from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and they define a parklet as a public seating platform that converts curbside parking spaces into vibrant community spaces. And more commonly, you see parklets used for outdoor dining. But they can also just be seats available for the public. I think there's a picture in the packet showing a bike rack that was once used for parking space. So a lot of cities like to be creative. Also, because of COVID, last summer there was a lot of cities that were trying to be very flexible and creative with a parklet design. And so you'll probably start to see them more common in larger cities. I think La Crosse has ordinance, Eau Claire has an ordinance. I believe Oshkosh at least discussed it. Now in our code, from a planning and zoning perspective, we don't have anything specifically. We deal mostly with private property, and the Public Works has a public right-of-way enhancement program. And this would probably be the most similar type of function, but they don't specifically mention a parklet. So right now, under the PROW program, as it's called, they allow outdoor dining space as well as outdoor, space for selling clothes and whatnot through their program. And this is reviewed by Main Street as well as Board of Public Works in some instances. So if we wanted to look into allowing parklets, this would more than likely be addressed through the city's PROW enhancement program, if the policy was changed. I talked with Main Street Marshfield last year at the peak of COVID to see if there's interest in looking into parklets. And she said that she did not think that the restaurants would be interested. Most of the restaurants that, while there's only a handful of restaurants, they have outdoor dining provided already. So there's not much of a need to take up those parking spaces at this moment. There's also the concern that maybe the traffic might be going, a little too fast on Central and noise. But they seem to be satisfied with the outdoor dining that was already there. However, we do like the concept of a parklet. You would have to take up 1 or 2 parking spaces, but then you would provide additional seating or additional landscaping. So it's definitely an idea that we've been thinking of and discussing. It's just we haven't really had anyone bring it up until last meeting. So I hope that the packet provided some good information, and if you have any questions, I will try to answer any questions, and if not, I can always come back with more information at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Yeah, I've been in several communities around the country where they have these types of parklets, let's call them, on the streets for dining, and I think that I actually prefer them to the on the sidewalk dining, because then they're not blocking pedestrian traffic as much. So I really like the idea, but we'll wait and see what the interest is among the people who would use them. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Carpillion.
Yeah, I think the traffic on Central would be a big deterrent for that. I mean, people go too fast in there. You got 4 lanes of traffic. The noise would be an issue. I'm with everybody else here. I like the concept in practice. I don't know if it necessarily fits the community right as it is.
Yeah, I agree. I've been around the country for work and have seen many of these parklets, but I just don't see enough room on Main Street to be able to offer a parklet there. And just as you just mentioned, with the traffic with 4 lanes, and I just don't, I don't see where that would work. I don't know if there's any places off Main Street that would consider that, but Main Street would be obviously the main area that you would think it would work, but I just don't know if there's enough room to do that. So great idea, though. I've seen enough of them where they're very successful.
Any other questions or comments for Bryce? Okay. Item number 14 is the appointment of a Plan Commission member to the Historic Preservation Committee.
Yes, so I can take that.
Okay.
This year, we had, Ken Wood was last year's Plan Commission member that was a representative for the Historic Preservation Committee. This committee mainly helps promote the historic resources here in the city, and they also provide recommendations like they did tonight for the Certificate of Appropriateness. They create brochures to highlight, the history of Marshfield. So it's a great committee to work with. And Ken Wood was on the HPC as the Plan Commission member last year. He had to unfortunately resign this year. And so we are looking for a new member that would be interested. And I had talked with Bill Pinker at one time. He is a member of the HPC currently. And it was just briefly mentioned that he would be interested in being the Plan Commission member if possible. So I just wanted to mention that that he is on there already, and he mentioned that. Now, if you don't feel the same way anymore, feel free to let me know. But I just want to let you know. And so with that, we would look for a nomination.
Okay. Mr. Carpillion.
I'll nominate Bill Pinker.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Mr. Pinker, would you accept that position?
I accept.
So we need a motion for someone to move and cast unanimous, and a second to,
Cast a unanimous ballot. Is there a motion to close the nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Mr. Pinker for this position? Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mr. Golden. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Item number 15 is an appointment of a new Town of McMillan Joint Plan Commission member.
yeah, I'll take
Josh
this
is
one.
gonna
Thank
take
you.
this one.
So the Joint Plan Commission is it's a joint commission between the city of Marshfield and the town of McMillan. We are in the second version of a plan that we've had going back to 2003. And really what it does is it allows cooperative planning efforts to go on with the adjacent township. McMillan is to the north. It's a 6-member committee. There's 3 members from the town of McMillan and 3 members from the city of Marshfield. They are appointed plan commission members, but it cannot be an elected official. So typically, we don't meet very often. I think we try to meet quarterly, but often with the pandemic last year, I don't think we met. We would try to meet probably a minimum once or twice a year, just to keep things going. We have 2 years left on the plan. There's really not any plans to extend it at this time. So usually it's a 3-year term, but it'd probably be a 2-year term. We have a good relationship with the town of McMillan. This is, open communication. However, the plan does cause some confusion in some cases. So you have some overlap, between the comprehensive plan, their plan, and our plan, and same with the subdivision review process. It can get a little bit messy with this plan. But I do think overall it's been a good experience with the township. We usually try to meet Friday mornings, but we could be flexible. The township still has to nominate their members as well, so the time could change depending on what the needs are of the members that are on it. So John Capillion is currently the only member right now. The previous members were Ken Wood and Kathy Banks, who are no longer part of the Plan Commission. So it does require a Plan Commission appointment. And so we'd be looking for two separate nominations, to fill the 2 vacancies on that.
Okay. And you said it cannot be an elected member,
Correct.
so that leaves, we're out.
But you can nominate people.
Yeah, I was on it once. Don't forget about it. I was on it.
So I guess I would open the floor for nominations for the Joint Plan Commission with McMillan.
Can we ask a question, just because I know the meetings are Friday morning, and there's some new members, and obviously we don't want to nominate them if they can't make meetings at.
Correct. And we would obviously
Not on a
work with
Friday.
everybody's availability. So just historically, it's been Friday mornings because that's worked for the folks that have been on it. Again, we haven't met in some time, so I think depending on who is nominated from the town of McMillan, we would obviously have some flexibility. I think before it was retired people, so they had some more flexibility, but don't leave, if that's a deterrent, that we can certainly work around that. I know another committee is not a lot of fun, but the commitment is an hour.
It's not bad. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a couple times a year, so. If you're nominated, are you able to make meetings? Are you flexible schedule Friday mornings?
I guess this train's coming down the track, isn't it? Pretty much.
We do have a member that's not, present, too. So, I mean, we do have a member that's not present, and
Yeah,
the
that's
person
first
that's
up,
not here,
right?
you make do the work, right? You nominate, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Pink,
Just as a note, previous actions on this particular item have generally nominated the person with the shortest tenure.
Like I said, it's
Again.
going down the
Yeah, there comes the
That
train.
seems to have been the precedence that's been set. Having served on the committee and having served as chairman, it's not a hard deal,
You said it only meets like quarterly?
if that.
Yeah, that would be the most I think we would meet. It may meet twice a year. We try to meet once a year, but
They kind of throw the date out saying it is open dates.
It's very flexible.
Just
Yeah, I usually send something about a week before.
I guess we're finished. What do I need to get out?
So we need to nominate 2?
yeah, we'll do one at a time just for. We'd like to do one at a time just for.
Draw it out or?
Okay, for dramatic purposes.
Yeah.
No,
Mr.
just,
Capillion, I think, has a nomination.
I'll nominate Mr. Johnson right next to me here.
Are there any other nominations for this first position on the Joint Plan Commission? I would entertain a motion. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close the nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Mr. Johnson.
so move.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Capillion and a second by Mr. Pinker, just for the record. And all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed, other than Mr. Johnson? That motion carries. I will now entertain nominations for a second appointment to the same committee.
I'll nominate Chris Golden.
Okay, Mr. Johnson nominates Mr. Golden. Is there, we don't need a second.
Move to close nominations, cast unanimous ballot.
Is there a second to that? Okay, second by Mr. Rosendich. And any comments or questions?
Complaints you were gonna
See,
say?
I was, almost said complaints, but, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries as well. Item number 16, items for future agendas. Josh has got one.
Yeah, so we're in the midst of our capital improvement program plan and a process to approve that. It's a 5-year plan that for the new members, we review mostly capital projects, so public works projects, but also planning projects. And what we like to do is have this commission review some of those infrastructure and utility projects that kind of covers us for 6223. So we don't have to bring back every single project, but then you can review like road projects and things like that. So we'll be having that next month. And then we'll also, hopefully, if we move forward on things, we'd be reviewing the infrastructure for the city subdivision project. So if that gets moved to the next level with the council. So those are the upcoming items. I don't think we have anything else.
Okay. Anyone else have any items for future agendas? Seeing none, item number 17 is staff updates.
Yeah, I do have one. I just want to let the plan commission know at last month's meeting, there was no motion to approve a rezoning request from single-family residential to two-family residential. Our zoning code isn't super clear on how that process works when there's no motion. I mean, there was a motion made, but it would fail due to a lack of a second. So when that happens, we had to seek out the opinion of our city attorney, and he advised that we bring this back to council to just see what they wanted to do with it. So at last week's meeting, Bryce brought it forward to the council. The council is asking to bring it back for their consideration. So it didn't get denied necessarily, but the public hearing was held in April, so we don't have to redo that again. And we've shared that with them that there were some concerns, but ultimately it's a council decision regardless. But we wanted to let you know that that's the process, that it didn't just die, it's going to be moving forward.
Okay. No other staff updates? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Rosendich, second by Mr. Golden. We're adjourned.